there is a clip of Nick Fuentes being interviewed by Candace Owens that I actually came across a while ago, but I just thought it would be nice to check it out and do a reaction to it. And I'm not sure where this is in the interview, but Candace Owens is a big conservative influencer, and so is Nick Fuentes. Currently, I think they're like in some kind of beef or some kind of like tension situation. But at this time, I think this interview actually caused that actually. But currently they're kind of going at it. But at this time, since they were both conservatives and they both tend to have strong criticisms of African Americans, they sat down and did an interview together. So I'm about to play that clip for you guys right now.
So I'm trying to understand if you think that it's all black people are like this, or if your world is kind of colored.
I'm actually gonna rewind this, but like I say, they start off talking about black people, so the same old from them. But the larger interview may have more like I saw with PBD. So if you haven't checked out the Candace and Nick Fuentes interview, check it out and just see all what they talked about and not just this particular clip. So I'll play it again and I'll try not to rewind in the future.
So I'm trying to understand if you think that it's all black people are like this, or if your world is kind of colored by this is what's going on in America. This has failed for 1,000 reasons. Welfarism has definitely, black people in 1940s, stand up. My grandfather, I talk about that denigration and the corrosion of culture. Yeah. That's happening.
So this is a short clip, but I can already see it's a lot going on. So she brought up, she's asking Nick about black culture, and she's asking her, is black culture the way it is because of, I guess, genetics, but she brought up, is it policies? So we were just talking about welfare and how the government's policies affect the economy. They also can potentially affect the culture. So when she brings up welfare came about in the 1930s because of the Depression, as I stated earlier in the episode, but then there were some tweaks in the 60s. So at one point you had poor blacks and poor whites living in cities, and they were all in the Section 8 housing. But then under the Jim Crow, which actually I think might have been under the Democrats, the poor whites were allowed to move to the rural America, and they were allowed to keep the father in the home, so the father could move with the white family to rural America. However, it was different for the African Americans. For them to stay in the Section 8 housing, a man could not be in the house. So because of this, the two cultures have had somewhat different, the two cultures have somewhat been affected differently based upon policies that were set in place. But before I go off on a tangent, let's see what they're talking about, where they're going.
Whatever you want to name it, there is this intentional corrosion of culture. So do you think it's literally, well, this is just what a black person is when they come out? Or do you think that post welfare, LBJ, Great Society, this is what black Americans have become, and I have a right to respond to that and say that as a white man, I don't want to live there?
Well, I think it's more nature than people would like to believe. There's this classic tension of, is it nature, is it nurture, is it cultural, or is it intrinsic, is it racial? And I've always been on the latter side of this among conservatives. Conservatives like to say it's all culture.
We're agreeing so far. I think I stated a couple episodes ago that nature and nurture both affect people's behavior, people's intelligence, people's decisions. But I do believe that there's also a genetic component. So he's saying the genetic component is more than nurture. I would say that too. I do think that your genetics play a larger role in your behavior than your nurture. But I think nurture is important. Anybody who has kids know you raise the kids. You don't just have the kids and let them grow up however they're going to be. You somewhat set rules and principles and guidelines because those things are supposed to enter in your mind, and over time they're supposed to have some impact on your thinking and your way of life, your beliefs.
Black America is the way it is because of hip hop music and the Great Society and that kind of stuff. And
right. So, and then a lot of conservatives do say that. They'll say the music causes the behavior. That's what me and D1 got into it about, right? The music can have an effect, but everyone listens to similar music in my generation. So everyone's group does not behave the same. You can, as we stated before, Asians act away in general, not each individual Asians, but you can separate the races. Asians act away, Hispanics act away, whites act away, blacks act away. But all four groups listen to rap music, so why don't all four groups act exactly the same? You know, I can't place the behavior on each group on the music. But let's see what else you.
I think the uncomfortable reality is a big part of it is intrinsic. You know, one of the big arguments against the abolition of slavery in the 1860s is that, you know, when Europeans colonized Africa, they hadn't discovered the wheel. There's no...
I mean, I figured it'd be too good to be true. So black people did have wheels in sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, I have to stop it every second. They had 2- and 3-story buildings. In sub-Saharan Africa.
No writing. There's no written language. Missionaries had to go to Africa in the last century and invent it for the African people because they...
There's a man called Mansa Musa. If you get time to look him up, he was before the time period he's talking about. He literally caused inflation worldwide because he had so much money. He was giving away gold, traveling from West Africa to East Africa, and I think maybe further into somewhere into Europe. So to state these people had no writing is false. They had writing. I just can't off the top of my head remember the various languages, but I know they had one on the west part of sub-Saharan Africa towards Nigeria is in West Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, but I mean even closer to like the Ivory Coast, like way on the border. I mean they had 3 kingdoms actually in, well, since I'm talking about it, it's slightly a tangent, but they had 3 kingdoms in sub-Saharan Africa. They had one on the coast, then they had one around Nigeria, and then they had one around the Congo. So Africa's a little different from Asia and Europe in terms of the terrain. So the people were kind of scattered out because you have all these deserts, but they did have like a civilization here in Central Africa. And there was also a civilization in the west part of Africa, and then also another one on the coast of West Africa. So they had civilization, they had writing, they had money, they had a wheel, they had multiple story buildings. I mean, at one point, the Greeks later on, not specifically, was before what he's talking about, but and some up before what I'm talking about as well. There were Greeks and people from South Europe who came and studied in sub-Saharan Africa. So if they came and studied, they had universities in sub-Saharan Africa. So, I mean, it's just bullshit. I mean, maybe if people don't do the research, they don't know. But if you do the research, you will find out that West Africa did have its own culture and its own civilization. Now, I'm not going to argue with anybody who says that but in studying this, it does seem as though Northern Europe and parts of Southern Europe were more advanced. Some parts of Asia were more advanced. Some parts of East Africa, like that's sort of like the Ethiopians and the Egyptians who have like straighter hair as opposed to like type of hair that I have that's somewhat more coarse. But yes, there were different civilizations, and I could understand that maybe West Africa wasn't the most technically advanced, but in no way were like sub-Saharan Africans not advanced, and they were not way less intelligent like Nick is trying to imply. But let this finish because I get on tangents when people start talking about blacks.
There's no recorded history. They didn't have writing.
So Egypt is not in Africa.
Well, Egypt is a different race. The Egyptians were not black.
Okay, but you said when they went to Africa.
All right, this dude, it's a back and forth with homeboy. Now, okay, black can have lots of meaning. So when sub-Saharan Africans, like I was describing, is like the coarser hair and the black brown skin, but they're obviously Ethiopians have brown skin. People in Sudan have brown skin. Now Egyptians do have lighter skin because they mixed more with the East Asians and the Southern Europeans, but Ethiopians would not be considered white, and people don't necessarily consider Ethiopians a different race from black people. So I do understand that Egyptians are not what people deem as black, but there were people in East Africa like Ethiopians, like I say, who would be considered black. So to say they're a different race, yes and no. Race is just a tricky thing. I mean, I'll probably do a deep dive on genetics because it's specific traits and markers things that mark you down for where you fit on the racial spectrum. But
Africa. So I just want to...
The interior of Africa in the late 19th century, scramble for Africa.
So we're now knocking Egypt out of Africa.
Well, Egypt is part of northern Africa, sub-Saharan Africa.
You said Africa, so I'm not trying to get a gotcha. I'm just responding. You're saying Africa.
Sure. Yeah.
It's in Africa. It's Egypt. It's kind of ridiculous to say there was no written language. Well, so I'm just trying to get you to
sure. Egyptians are not Africans.
If I'm not pushing back, the internet will. So
Egyptians,
bro, bro, Egyptians are not sub-Saharan Africans. Egypt, I mean, just like Candace said, Egypt is in Africa. They have Northern Africans, they have Sub-Saharan Africans, they have East Africans. They basically have potentially 3 races in Africa. You could say that, but all the people in Africa, whether they're Northern Africans, East Africans, like I said, Ethiopians, Egyptians, Northern Africans would be like Libyans and people from Libya, Morocco, I think. It gets confusing because Spain is right there. No, the Spain and Portugal is in the Europe part, and Morocco is in the Africa part. So Morocco is in Africans. And then obviously the Sub-Saharan Africans, Nigerians, etc., Congo. So those are 3 races in Africa.
Those are not racial Africans. When I say African, I'm saying Sub-Saharan Africans.
Sub-Saharan, okay.
Black people because it is a different race. In Sub-Saharan Africa, and Europeans did not penetrate that until the late 19th century. They didn't have any of this. To the extent that you have infrastructure in Africa, it's from the Muslims in the Sahel and the Maghreb in northern Africa, where the Arabs colonized. And then you had, Carthage and Egypt. You had ancient civilizations. But Sub-Saharan Africa, they didn't have that. You take these people out of that land and put them here, and they're enslaved people. You let them free in a modern, liberal republic. They're not going to succeed. It's not going to go well for them. And that was one of the arguments against abolition.
It's just dumb. Like, black people are succeeding. Black people have been succeeding since since slavery ended. I mean, what he's saying is just stupid.
People said if you free them without any assimilation, without any kind of process for them to be acclimated, they're going to die. And that's...
Yes, I mean... When black people were slaves in America, they weren't taught. So they didn't know they knew how to read and write before they were slaves, but like when they were slaves, they weren't taught English, for example. So yes, you have to acclimate them and they have to assimilate in society. I agree with that.
Exactly what happened. Many of the bottom 10% of the lowest IQ Africans just died off.
I haven't looked into this. I highly doubt this happened. It doesn't even make sense.
For generations. And it had pardon the expression, but it had a eugenic effect, because over time, if the weakest are dying off, that's one argument for why blacks in America have a standard deviation higher IQ than the blacks in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Black people in America do not have a standard deviation IQ over Sub-Saharan Africans. Nigeria has about the same IQ as African Americans. They're both around 85. And then when we discussed earlier nature versus nurture, this is an example. Sub-Saharan Africa currently has a lot of areas that are underdeveloped. So in the underdeveloped areas, there's a lower IQ. But we've done tests in Africa as well as worldwide, and people are starting to see, the scientists are starting to notice, yes, if someone is malnutritioned or they don't have the economic means to get certain resources, that can affect someone's intelligence. But you can account for that, but you can also raise people's income or raise their resources and raise their nutrition. So worldwide, people are becoming healthier. So as people in third world are becoming healthier, their IQ is going up. So I say that to state that if Africans were to have the same standard of living as America, many scientists are saying their IQ would be about 80. So I do see and understand that, yes, the African IQ at its max potential may not be what the Northern Europeans is, but the Southern Europeans are, as I stated episodes ago, so you may should check out that episode if you have time. The Northern Europeans and Southern Europeans don't have the same IQ, so there's a difference in them. And then the East Asians have a higher IQ than the Northern Europeans and the Southern Europeans. So I going with what he's saying, there's different the IQ differentiates amongst many racial groups. So I don't think that what he's implying about Africans is true, because his numbers they're inflated. It's like hyperbole. He's making the sub-Saharan Africans seem much less intelligent than they are.
So, so I do believe there is something intrinsic going on there. And what makes people uncomfortable about this is the idea that it's unchangeable. There's something about, and this is why I'm a Catholic, we do have
he brings Jesus in and God and religion at the craziest time. Like, he talks bad about black people and then tries to say he's a Christian. I mean, he's probably a Christian. I'm a Christian. We're brothers in that sense, but it's like, I just don't see why he has to be so inflammatory towards my people. It's going to get a reaction out of me. And so I just don't know why he's doing it, other than to be provocative and to get clicks, I guess.
Inherent desire for universalism. We do believe that there's a common humanity and a common human community and all of that. We hate the idea that we're born a certain way and we can never change. And that's just the way it is. And we even think about this in terms of, it's become not so popular these days to tell children, you can be whatever you want to be. Because we know that's not the case. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people are smart, some dumb, some ugly, some handsome.
You gotta, okay, there's always a lot to unpack with this dude. So, like, yes, you got tall people, you have short people, you have fast people, you have slow people, you have fat, you have skinny, but everything's on a spectrum. So to say one's smart and one is dumb, maybe if you're comparing two people, yes, one could be smarter than the other. But if you throw in a third person, now the one person you were claiming was smart, are they actually smart? If you now add a third person and they're further away from the third person in intelligence than the two, that I'll give you an example using numbers. I won't use I'll use actual IQs. Let's say there's a person with a 120 IQ. Then there's a person with a 95 and 100 IQ. When you compare a person with a 100 IQ to somebody with a 95 IQ, sure, the 100 IQ is smarter. You compare the 95 and the 100 to someone with a 120 IQ, are not the 95 and 100 IQ practically the same? I look at the races in that way because I've been studying, not studying, but looking into IQ, the GIQ, which is tests, and then the standard IQ that people know, which is kind of stuff you can't prepare for, like memory, recall, spatial things, and logic. So I've been looking into it and I see differences, but to me, the differences between races are not huge. When you start looking at it and comparing like millions of people, you kind of start to notice it. But even in totality, the differences aren't as huge as a lot of people are trying to make it.
That's why, by the way, inceldom is a big part of this also.
So you believe these are immutable characteristics that are assigned at birth?
I think that, yes.
For the most part.
Things like race, all those attributes are immutable and unchangeable. But
they have changed. Just factually speaking, they have changed.
They change over time, over the generations.
Okay, so then you don't think it's immutable. Because if this was an immutable
individual person.
Okay, so you're saying that if you are born at this space and time as a black person in America, here is the cards that you're dealt with, and you can't change that over time.
Something like IQ does not change. It doesn't change wildly. It only changes genetically over. IQ is a big one, and that.
I hear him and a whole bunch of other people talking about IQ. I just got into this space, and I feel like I discuss IQ more in depth than a lot of the people that I'm talking about. So that should tell y'all something, right? They keep bringing up IQ, but they don't cover it for you guys. They don't tell you what it is. They don't tell you what it tells you, what it doesn't tell you. They just kind of use it as a thing because the numbers, yes, are different. Whites are higher than blacks in America, not necessarily worldwide. Maybe next time I'll show some clips comparing like African Americans to whites in Northern Europe versus whites in Southeastern Europe. I might cover that in detail to show that some whole groups of blacks are smarter than whole groups of whites. So they don't go into like the particulars or the nuance. They just make these general statements that have some truth, and then just because something has some truth doesn't mean it means what everybody's taking it as. That's what I don't like about Nick and other influencers. They seem like they're smart as I'm paying more attention to them and watching them. So they're smart enough to know that like the general things they're saying, there's slight truth or a strong portion of truth, but then when you leave out the whole truth, you're not giving people the whole picture. So actually, I feel like it would be better if they would not lead people on. Like, you have some truth, but how about give people the whole picture?
Changes, that's a genetic trait. And so that can change over the generations, but not, you can't take an individual that's 75 IQ, which is the average in West Africa, and take them to 100.
So
As I stated, because of the situation in Africa, they're not up to par with everything. It is possible that the average IQ is 75. Okay, that's possible. 100, yeah, that's Northern Europeans, but the thing is, they're just skipping a lot of whites, though, right? They're skipping Southern Europe, Southeast Europe. They do this a lot, actually, because it's done in America. You're comparing the top whites like Finland, Denmark, Germany, and then you're comparing them to the lowest blacks with the sub-Saharan Africans who don't even have adequate nutrition at the moment. Do the same thing in America. Talk about black neighborhoods, you're gonna pick the poorest black neighborhood, the most violent black neighborhood. Then you're gonna start talking about somewhere where you have wealthy whites. It's the same old playbook from these guys. I mean, you're not really comparing everybody. You're picking out the best of the best in one group, comparing the worst of the worst in another group. It's ridiculous. It's a lie.
Some people can't produce
it's not a fair comparison.
Smart person.
I believe they can, actually.
Yeah.
But
so does that kind of debunk your?
No, because it's rare that happens. But IQ is a heritable trait, so it's unlikely that happens.
Well, the clip on him was short today, but I had a lot to say. So if you guys want me to continue doing Nick Fuentes clips, I can. If there are other influencers that you guys want me to react to on either side of the aisle, I feel like I have been commenting a lot about Republicans and conservative people. But if anybody has clips of liberals or Democrats, I have no problem responding to those as well. So if there's anything you guys come across, please leave it in the comments at Critical Commentary TV on all the socials. And then I have Lil Mo Music social on X. My producer don't like when I shout it out, but that's my social. So if you do have clips, feel free to send them to Lil Mo Music on X. If you like this video, please smash the like button, comment, and subscribe. New shows airing Monday through Thursday.